Hey there, it's Sandra. Today we're going to talk with Margaret Tantillo, the Executive Director of Dress for Success of Western Massachusetts. We're going to talk about change, resilience, and how she uncovered strategies for success in the midst of a messy patch. Margaret has dedicated her career working with nonprofits to improve the lives of women and girls. She has over 20 years of experience and proven success in nonprofit management. Past experience includes a senior leadership position for a statewide organization with over 65,000 members and an $11 million budget. We'll talk with Margaret about a past experience in which the organization she worked for went through a major transition and how she was not emotionally equipped to deal with change at that time. We'll talk about how she got through that messy patch and then made the commitment to learn how change impacts individuals and organizations and how those lessons prepared her to be strong and an impactful leader during a global pandemic.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sandra.
And I'm Nicole. And we're entrepreneurs,
Wives,
a mom,
a favorite auntie,
creative souls,
and women who are fearlessly navigating the middle of life.
We created a community of women over 40 who embrace the past, appreciate where we are now, and take action to live our best life because it's all about the journey.
Hello, Margaret. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Sandra. Good to see you.
Great to have you.
There.
We're going to start off our podcast like we do with all of our podcasts by asking you this one question. If you could run off on a road trip with any person living or dead, I'm going to say that again. If you could run off on an epic road trip with anyone living or dead, who would it be? And bonus points if you know where you're going.
Yeah. So I would have to say that if I was to run off on a epic road trip, I would love to go with my belated grandmother Cecil. She and I'll tell you where I would love to go. We used to go. She grew up in the same city that I grew up in, Rochester, New York, and we used to go on these house tours in the neighborhood which she lived, and we used to go around to all the houses that she used to live in. One of the things and one of the reasons why I thought about her is because, she was born in 1912 and she passed in 2010. And, when we're talking about change, you have to imagine that in the beginning of her life, they were driving around with horses and buggies. And at the end of her life, imagine all the things she went through, and at the end of her life we're on the internet. And so I'd love to talk to her about all the different things she saw in her lifetime and how she navigated all this change in her life. And she was always very optimistic and always looked for the best in everything, regardless of the situation throughout her life.
Awesome. She sounds like a neat lady.
Road trip. Yeah, I love that. Well, Margaret, can you tell us a little bit about your early experiences working for nonprofits and how your focus of improving the lives of women and girls came to be?
Yeah, so I started out in nonprofit work right out of college, and I started working for a youth serving organization, and I loved it. I love giving, kids, teaching them something that they didn't necessarily know how to do, how to increase their self-esteem, made them more willing to maybe take risks and positive risks in other areas. But this was an organization that wasn't gender specific. And there were things that were very obvious to me very early on that, being a woman, you're treated differently. And I will share one instance which just burned me up, and I was like, oh no, this is a problem. I was very young. When you're young, you're very outspoken and idealistic, which I still am. So we had this young woman, working, and she was blonde and really cute. And one of my direct colleagues called her Tasty Cakes. And I know, right? Right? And I'm like, oh
You cannot
no.
see me right
Oh,
now. My mouth is on the.
I know. I was like, oh no, this is wrong. And I was like talking to other people about it, and and I'm like, this needs to go up the ladder. And they're like, no, no, she didn't mind being called Tasty Cakes. And so that's like when I realized, there's really a lot to be done for women and girls as they grow up and navigate this. I mean, things have absolutely changed, but there's still so much to do in terms of social justice and equality, whether, it's racial, women, you know, trans. It's a lot to do. So there's so much to do that I really find it helpful to focus on women, and even the women that we serve in Dress for Success, Western Massachusetts. The majority of them live in poverty, and the way I look at it is, everybody gets dealt a different hand in life, and the women we work with were not dealt the same. They weren't dealt a pair of aces, and so whatever I can do and Dress for Success can do to equal level the playing field is been my life's mission, whether it's with girls or women.
Did you always know that you wanted to be in some type of a leadership position, or is that something that you've morphed into over time?
Yeah, I mean, when you're young and you start working in nonprofits, you start working in general, and you're like, oh, promotion, So, you always look for that promotion, and look to improve your career. I don't think it was till maybe my early mid 40s where I realized that being an executive director of a small nonprofit was really where I wanted to be. It served my skill set, my need to be in a leadership role, but not too out of touch and too distant from the people we serve. It's really important to me to be close to the people we serve.
Mm, cool. Yeah. I think it takes a little bit of time to like get to that place to know exactly who you want to serve and what role you want to be in. And it sounds like it didn't take too long for you to appreciate and see that and then move toward it. Um, I wonder if we can talk a little bit about the messy patch that you referred to in a past experience, past job, and talk a little bit about um, what that looked like when you were working with Girl Scouts of Connecticut, and tell us about what happened and how you dealt with that time.
Yeah, so, I work for the Girl Scouts, which is a fabulous organization, and the bulk of my career was with the Girl Scouts. I worked with the Girl Scouts for 13 years, and the majority of that was in Connecticut. Again, I was on that sort of promotion, every 2 or 3 years, and, do a good job, and everything was sort of predictable and stable, and loved the work that we were doing. And then what transpired, which was really probably the biggest personal and professional development in my life. And again, this was around the age 40,
Mm,
that the organization, the Girl Scouts of National, um, wanted to reduce the number of chapters. So we were taking 5 independent nonprofits, all Girl Scouts, separate nonprofits in Connecticut, and making them one organization. And great, great in concept to um, utilize all the resources and to streamline, some of the departments, and certainly, it serves the organization now. But at the point we were going through it, it was very difficult for people who worked in nonprofit. We were very accustomed to, being a small organization and, doing the things, pretty much the way we had done them. And I would have to say that people in corporate probably go through this more in terms of realignments and
mm,
restructuring. But in nonprofit, this was completely new to all of us that worked to the organization. And it really threw us all for a loop. And, it was personally, there were things that I personally and emotionally reacted to, which after I took some time to learn about change, I realized, oh, this is perfectly predictable, right? That, some of the emotions I was having and everybody else was having were perfectly legitimate. And I also read a lot about organizational change in terms of, how do you guide people from one way of thinking and doing into another way of thinking. And it was very fascinating. I think most of what, I want to touch on here is, how people go through change personally. Um, so I
Can I
think,
interrupt you for just a
yeah,
moment,
absolutely.
Margaret?
Mhm.
I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the role that you played, and some of the challenges that came up for you. Like what was happening for you when those were coming up, in terms of how were they unique, how were they new for you, and what made it hard to work through them?
Yeah, so personally, I was at one point I was chief of staff, so I was responsible for facilitating and starting a lot of the change and seeing transition in staffing and people leaving. And so as somebody who really, was so entrenched in the mission of serving girls and helping girls be the best that they can be, some of this that was going around me was disheartening. And then the interesting thing is, people would interpret it differently, what it meant to be true to the mission. And so we had to come to some consensus organizationally about, well, what does that mean, as the new organization, even though we're serving the same mission. Personally, I mean, things that people were going through, things like depression, things like paranoia. Um, and, again, I had to take it upon myself to read and understand what was happening, because personally, I was starting to suffer from anxiety, which is not something I had before, and not too much since. But one of the things I shared with you, Sandra, is that, I was diagnosed with severe depression. And
Mm.
um, it's not something I talk about often, but, situations and drastic change is just going to exasperate any sort of feelings or ways of work. And it definitely did for me, so much so that, I sought, help.
Mm.
And the reason why I'm sharing this now, I think because what people are going through right now with COVID, is our whole world. Again, I go
Mm.
back to, work-wise, my whole world was turned upside down. Right now, literally, our whole world is turned upside down. And so by sharing some of the things that I learned and techniques, and even just by understanding that some of the reaction is okay, and I don't want to say predictable, like we're all predictable, but I want to say that it's in some ways anticipated, that it's not something out of the norm that right now we get depressed.
Mhm.
It's not so much out of the norm that we get angry, that, with everything that's going on. And one of the books that I read, which is great, was a book called Transitions by William Bridges. And that really helped me understand, what we personally go through. And one of the concepts that really helped me is that going through change is very similar to going through and mourning the loss of something or
Mm.
someone.
Mhm.
And so, now when I see that happening and maybe I have a day that I'm not so well, I'm like, okay, this is part of the process. And, I can do things so it doesn't last as long. I could just acknowledge it and, work through it. So I don't know if you have any other questions. I know that's a lot of
I think
information and a
I
lot that
think
I
what you
shared, but
shared is amazing, and it's so spot on, like you said, for the time that we're in right now. And it's so interesting, and I'll share with both of you and our listeners that I've been going through holistic energy coaching. A lot of it is healing me from the inside out, because
Mm.
I'm doing a lot of external work for my health and
Mhm.
wellness. And one of the things that we are working on, which you touched on, Margaret, was acknowledging the feelings that you're going through, telling yourself it is okay that I'm feeling these things, but then refusing to wallow down and make your little pity party nest, which we as humans have the tendency to do, especially if we're feeling overwhelmed with whatever that emotion is, if it's heavy, and then pulling others down in with us, right? So we have little partners down in here. And so it's really okay to acknowledge, tell yourself it's okay, but then, like you said, take action to help yourself work through it. And it's not going to happen overnight, especially if it's a big thing. You know, if you've lost your job, if you have lost a loved one, if you're going through a major life transition, like it can take time. So I love that you're sharing this. And I think you're tapping into your vulnerability, and you're so brave for doing that with us. And I really think that what we're sharing here today and your story is going to help others to just know that they are not alone, that we all go through this, that we are all human. And it's so important to remind ourselves that this is not abnormal and that we're not crazy, and that this happens. And we can't control a lot of the external factors that go on in our life, but it has everything to do with how we react to it, right? So I love that you're sharing all this. So thank you for doing that. Can you talk a little bit about sort of, you said you sought help, you sought treatment when you were going through this depression. Can you share a little bit about kind of your process for that, and kind of what happened after you received the care that you needed?
Yeah, so first of all, I was very fortunate to get good care. And it's actually really funny because the Girl Scout office was right across the street from the Institute of Living, which is, a facility, mental health facility. And, so the joke was, where do like that was the joke, until, of course, now I'm receiving outpatient from the Institute of Living. And, I learned a lot about, how our perceptions, if you perceive something some way, then everything that you interact with is going to be interpreted in that way, for one. Um, you know, uh, the other thing I learned is that, I think this goes back to what you were saying about, we don't have control over everything, but, you learn to focus on the things that you can control.
Yeah.
And that by doing that, it just sort of settles yourself. And then, I even was to the point where it's like, focus on the task. Like, this is the one task, focus on the task. But we have, other things that, broader things that we can control in our lives, but don't get caught up in the things that you can't control. And, sometimes you have to be patient and see how things pan out. Um, and I received, was fortunate to receive good care. The um, other thing about, going through that is, it's going back to, at that point it was cognitive behavioral therapy, and now it's something else. But, it's just going back to those tools around, what am I saying to myself? How can I just reframe that? And I think one of the things that I utilize more now than I ever have before is really gratitude and being looking at the things that I have that I can be grateful for. Like, there's a lot of things that are difficult for all of us, but at the end of the day, I have a home, I have a family, and that is, probably the most important thing. Is just to focus on those things, because I don't want to get into all the things that are going on in the world, the election, racial, protests and everything like that. But we can clearly say some of that's out of our control, except for voting. We can vote.
It's interesting, Margaret. I was thinking a little bit about resilience before our call, and what that looks like. And, resilience is about being able to bounce back during difficult times as quickly as we can. And I think that some of the things that you just said are part of that process. One, gratitude is an amazing piece of that process. Really looking at the things that you have in your life that you're grateful for, that changes something emotionally in the body and helps you to move forward. The other thing that you said was really looking at the things that you can actually control. If you can control a task, if you can complete it, if you can like do whatever it is that needs to get done in that moment, then that gives you a real sense of accomplishment. It feels like you are, you've really got the power and the confidence to do what needs to happen, as opposed to really dwelling in that place of things that you have no control over. That is certainly anxiety provoking. And I think that both of those are things that I have read about and heard about a number of times, and I think they make a huge difference. I would love to hear how some of the things that you have learned, in the past, whether it was with the Girl Scouts of Connecticut or otherwise in your personal life, like how have you taken those skills and those lessons, how have you brought them to Dress for Success and helped them during this really critical time?
Yeah. First of all, I just want to go back to what we were talking about before in terms of resilience, because I
Mm,
think some people either feel like you're either resilient or you're not resilient. And I just want to say that there are things that you can learn when, all the things that we're talking about are things you can learn and tools to help you be more resilient. I don't want anybody out there to feel like I did, oh, change is crazy and I don't know how to deal with this. But again, if you take the time to, you know, listen to certain things or read certain things. But to your question, Sandra, it was really interesting. Here I am, executive director of a small nonprofit. It was me and two half-time staff people, one of which was new, and over 100 volunteers. And the women we serve are the most vulnerable.
mm.
I mean, if we think about ourselves and how we were hit by the shelter in place, the impact to the women we serve was in some ways, and will be life altering. And so what Dress for Success is, and that's what made us sort of more important and more resolved to make sure that we're delivering programs and supporting our women. One of the things that Dress for Success was um, really few people in other organizations. Dress for Success Western Mass. Dress for Success is a whole worldwide. I mean, our CEO is fabulous in terms of making sure that we're still up and running. But specifically, Dress for Success Western Mass, we received feedback about how quickly, and this word is overused, but at the time, how quickly we pivoted. And I can directly point to that messy period in my 40s,
Mm.
because otherwise, you can become, or I could have become, um, almost paralyzed or not move, not react to make sure that we're serving our women for their needs right now, because the needs of our women change overnight.
Mm.
It frustrates me when I see organizations doing the same thing that they did 6 months ago. And in some ways maybe they changed them a little bit, but we're preparing our women for the future. I'm not preparing them for what the job, you know, um, market looked like 6 months ago, or the way of work, 6 months ago. So one of the things so we did two things really that was incredible, and Sandra, you were part of this. And another thing is like I just like went forward. I'm like, oh no, we're gonna do this, right? No clue how it was going to be done. But I am so grateful that I had volunteers who were like, oh, okay. So we had if you can believe it, our annual fundraising event in April. And, we were tight in shelter in place. And so I said, oh, well, we're going to take this online, right? So we were one of the first organizations to do it. We pulled it off very well.
It was amazing. I want to step in for a moment and just say, as someone who has connected with Dress for Success and been a part of some of their efforts, I worked with Margaret a little bit on Common Threads, which was the name of the event, and it was really incredible how that whole thing came together. And Margaret is right when she says, we're not really sure what we're doing, but we're doing this. And
Mhm.
she did it.
And I think right now that's okay.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows. So make us, put a stake in the ground and say we're going to do it. And yeah, so we can go, and share how great that event was, but that's really not, I think more productively, I can share other instances of how we move forward. And as soon as shelter in place, was announced, my staff picked up the phone and they talked directly to our women who had been in our boutique being suited for the past 6 months, to the women in our programs. Of course, goes without saying, all our programs had to go digitally.
Mm.
But in the phone conversation, I mean, there were a few other things that became emerging needs, but overall, their connectivity to the internet, their ability to access and
Yeah.
utilize things like Zoom. And it was very obvious to us in other nonprofits on the ground that that was an issue. And again, I've pulled some of my, new volunteers and some, volunteers who had been with us for a while. I said, again, here's the need. We have a we're going to form a digital literacy task force. And, I like to think we're on the forefront of this. We have 10 now volunteers that call up and provide one-on-one coaching. I mean, if you can imagine that you're at home and you don't know how to access the internet, you can't, there's no, if you don't know how, somebody has to talk you through it on the phone. And, we have really incredible volunteers that are willing and patient, to do that. We've provided equipment, we've provided, a variety of different supports. Um, of those, so we've provided support for over, 25 women, probably hundreds of hours of support. Of the 25 women, 10 of them went into our own workforce development program, which is currently going on. One went on to a program at BayPath for more information about, digital literacy and how to use software. And another one went on to HCC for additional training as well. Um, so, I could talk for ages about digital equity, because right now that is a significant, um,
Can
area that needs to be.
I want to ask you though, Margaret, like what was it that what clicked in for you? What do you think was different now
Mhm.
versus in your 40s when you realize like, okay, so I have this group that I need to run and their needs have changed dramatically. Like what do you think happened for you when you pivoted?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to my experience in my 40s and change, like I knew that you can't do things the same way. It's particularly for women who have different needs. I can't do things the same way because our women can't advance their lives and better their lives if they're not doing things differently. Um, I understand the question. I just think I don't have a concrete answer, but I know it's specifically linked to that period in my life
Yeah.
that standing still wasn't an option. And here comes my quote from Wayne Gretzky. Well, I don't even watch hockey. My president would kill me for that comment. But I think he said, what did he say? He said, you don't make 100% of the shots you don't take.
Yeah.
So if I'm
So
not
you go
taking,
for it, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I can imagine, Margaret, that this time around,
Mm.
you had a vested interest in who these women were that you were serving, you and your volunteers. So I can imagine that that sort of helped pull you out of any potential funk that you might have been in when COVID hit as well, because, we were all affected with our businesses and personally and everything. But can you share a bit about your experience? I'm sure that there were some of the women that you were serving and some of your volunteers that you work with who were exhibiting their own anxiety and depression as they were navigating through COVID. So how did your experience help you to serve them as well in that capacity and support
yeah.
them?
So I think one of my past experience, first of all, I was able to recognize it very quickly. And we actually have a group that meets monthly. Um, and we very fortunately had somebody on our board of directors who has experience in therapy, and she came in and we had a conversation with our women, and they disclosed a lot about, their coworker has COVID and I'm scared to go to the office, and I'm at home with my child trying to educate them and do my work. And so we were able to provide that. Um, and then I think, changing the way we work in terms of being accessible digitally, and, picking up the phone to make sure that we're there one-on-one, and we have conversations with our women.
That connection is so important,
Mm.
where we don't feel that we're alone, especially when we're going through something that is so traumatic. Uh, Reaching out, I think, is huge. So the fact that you were helping to direct that initiative to
Yeah.
make sure that your volunteers were getting on the phone with the people that you're serving, I think that's really commendable, because I can imagine when you're already feeling like you're knocked down and you're trying to get help from an organization like Dress for Success, and then the world kind of comes down on top of you on top of that. I can imagine the feelings of trying to get out of that without the support would feel completely overwhelming. So there must have been that little sliver of hope every time that phone rang, from Dress for Success. So that's amazing.
I think it's interesting that a couple of the things that you've talked about, Margaret, how they've really impacted the women who are connected to Dress for Success, going back to that time in your 40s. One, being able to recognize pretty quickly what you're feeling,
Mhm.
right? And then being able to say to these women, are you feeling this way as well? Acknowledging that, making them feel less alone around that. So like that is like a big deal. Whenever you can validate someone's feelings, then they feel less alone and more able, because they have a buddy now. They have someone that they can turn to. The second thing is really understanding what you needed to do differently for these women so that they could have what they needed to either look for work or be in their job and do it while they're at home, caring for their children. Like, both of those things are really major skills and experiences that you have brought to this time. And I'm curious for other women who are obviously, we're all in the midst of a global pandemic, but for other women who may be struggling, do you have advice that you could share, or words of wisdom that connect to dealing with either mental health or dealing with becoming more resilient?
Mhm. One of the big things I would say is don't be deterred for asking for help,
Mm.
because you reach out to the person next to you and they're feeling the same way, or you reach out to the person next to you and they have a resource that can help you. I think I think people are hesitant to ask for help, but when you ask for help, that's when you get that connection back. Um, I would say that's probably one of the main things. And the other thing is, when we talked about doing things that are in your control, and, so you could settle yourself and feel like have, the things around you are in place. This is on the flip side of that. In order to um, really excel, is you take a chance. You got to take a chance. I mean, the worst thing is you could fail and learn from it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and one of the things when I think about change also, and when things are going on around me, one of the main things I do is I always look for opportunity,
Mm.
regardless. When something shifts, it can be as simple as, we all know a lot of people are adopting dogs right now. I can tell you the people who have dog grooming businesses are going to be doing quite well.
Yeah.
And there's always something that you can take from what you see around you and make a bit of a prediction. And that's where you take your chances, because they're measured
Mm-hmm.
risks. yep, always protect yourself. So if you fail, but there's always opportunity and things are going to open up. And what I share with the women who are in our trainings right now, you're taking our workforce development training right now, and you will be ready when things open up.
Mm-hmm.
If you start to think about workforce development when things open up, you're behind the eight ball. You're a little bit behind. So now is the time to get online, learn, you know, if it's a new language you're interested in, if it's, certainly IT, this whole knowing Zoom is, a skill set. So again, it's always looking for that opportunity.
I love that. And I think too, the word grit keeps coming to mind. It's through our lifetime, we constantly get knocked down.
Mhm.
It's the question of, are we going to continue to just keep standing up and keep trying again, like you were saying, and taking that risk? There's a terrific TED talk by Angela Duckworth, and it's all about grit. And it's fascinating. I've listened to it multiple times, and it just really goes to show that we have the choice to sit back and not take action and allow all the things to overwhelm us, or be vulnerable, put ourselves out there, take a risk, like you said, link arms with the folks that are willing to support you around, right? And give it a go, because what's the worst thing that could happen? You make a mistake or you fail and you pivot and you try something else. So I love that. And I love that you are embracing that mantra with your organization. Margaret, can you share with our listeners, if folks want to reach out to you, if they want to find you on social media, if they want to volunteer, if they want to donate, especially considering what you may need, especially during this time right now, whether that's, in the tech piece or clothing, can you share a little bit about where everybody can find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have a website. I think if you Google Dress for Success Western Mass, will definitely come up. Clothing and financial contributions are always welcome. Volunteers are always welcome. Our phone number is 413-732-8179. We have a very active Facebook page with Dress for Success Western Mass. And my email is westernmass@dressforsuccess.org. And even if you don't know what you want to do and you just want to help, there's so many different opportunities for volunteerism, either short projects or year-long projects. We could always find a fit for people's interests.
Fantastic.
Lady, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate your vulnerability, your bravery, your sharing of a time that might have been difficult and a bit messy, and how it has served you during this time to really improve the lives of the women that you're working with. It's really incredible.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate the opportunity. I don't often get the opportunity. So,
well, we're inspired by you, Margaret. So keep on keeping doing the good stuff, because you're amazing.
You too.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Messy Middle Road Trip podcast. We hope you were able to take a few tips toward caring for yourself and learning how to manage change.
If you want to keep the conversation going, visit us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or at messymiddleroadtrip.com. And if you like what we're doing, please consider subscribing to the podcast and leaving us a rating and review so we can reach more amazing middlers.
We're really looking forward to our next road trip with you. Until then, take care and thanks for riding shotgun.